I think a lot of senior pastors, when they get ready to retire, should go back to being an associate pastor, assistant pastor.
Really?
Go back and help a younger guy out
Yeah.
because you are in a different life stage. Because too often the pastors and the lead pastors, they're almost pretty close in the same life stage. They got young
Hmm.
kids at home. They don't have the same
Hmm.
older, and also older pastors have a lot of knowledge they could pass on to the assistants.
Well, Joe, thank you for coming on. It's great to have you, man. And I guess if we're kicking off, if I'm calling this season 2 or 3, you're the first guest in this new season of our podcast, and I can't think of a better one. And I just appreciate you. And when I read your article on, I think it was second place, and being that second man. And, I think our intro to our podcast is those serving in the second seat of their ministries and organizations. And sometimes we look at that, and I think you even mentioned in your article, it's people look at that as a stepping stone, or they look at that as, okay, I'm going to be an assistant and then I'll be a quote unquote real pastor. And the thing I so appreciated about your article was just the encouragement from scripture and from the practical of the need for that second man, the need for that guy that's in second place. And I definitely want to get into that some. But before we do, again, thank you for your willingness to come on, Joe, and be part of the podcast. And can you just tell our guys a little bit about yourself, kind of your background, how you landed where you are, and what you currently do, not only as an assistant, but with some of your writing?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I this is kind of my pastoral ministry is my third career. I started out, I was in the Marines for 15 years. I got out of that. I was a writer editor for various Christian publications for 15 years. And one of the places I've worked, I still work at, is the Gospel Coalition. And while I was at there, Gospel Coalition is very focused on pastoral ministry aspects and really focused on the local church. And so a pastor in the area reached out, thought I'd be really interested in local church, and said, "Hey, let's go plant a church together." And I'm like, "No, that sounds horrible. Why would I want to do that?" But he kept twisting my arm, and so I got into it and became an elder at that church. And I
Okay.
really realized how much I really appreciated pastoral ministry, and I wanted to do it full time. And so I applied for a job at McClean Bible Church, was down the road, and I kind of I'd kind of known some of the pastors here, and so I came on as in the second chair at our Arlington location.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How many years ago was that?
I've been in this church 6 years.
6 years. Okay. And so it's kind of stepping into that role as an elder then, in serving in that, even a support role or a leadership role in the church you helped start, that planted a seed to
Mhm.
continue on serving the Lord.
Yeah, I really got to appreciation for the plurality of elder
Yeah.
approach. I think too often uh, pastors go it alone, and we shouldn't. I think it's the more men we can have around us, and whether that's paid ministry staff or it's lay elders,
Yeah.
I think it's really important. So that really gave me appreciation for that, and for the role of just ministry in general.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's even with when you have elders around you or you have assistants around you, it goes from lonely to being the lonely three or four of you,
That's right.
at times. And so, well, that's fantastic. So now in the church, I know you're still writing a couple articles a month,
Yeah, I
right?
still write for the Gospel Coalition part
Yeah,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's really good. And then, what are some things that you have found yourself doing as an assistant? What's some of would you say your major rules are right now?
Yeah, my two major focuses are teaching and counseling.
Okay.
I have a degree in biblical counsel, so I do a lot of the
Oh, wow.
counseling work. Like we often teach a class like several times a month, so I often lead those classes.
Yeah.
And just the general administrative stuff, doing baptism interviews, doing membership interviews, just whatever
Mhm.
needs to be done. And in general, just kind of helping my lead pastor and whatever he needs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because oftentimes he's overburdened, overwhelmed, so I'm
Oh, yeah.
trying to help him take some of that load off.
So do you guys just this is just curiosity, your counseling, do you do that? They probably go onto your website and to sign up for counseling. Is that how they do it? To schedule with you?
Usually, we mostly focus on just the people in our church.
I
So
was gonna say, do you primarily just church family is what
yeah,
you look for
and
members?
they
Yeah.
all have my email address. They have my link to my calendar, so they just
Yeah.
pick a time on my calendar. And
Yeah. That was fantastic, by the way. And if I told my guys, look, we got to figure out how to do this. Was it Calendarly? Is that what it's called
oh
that you
yeah,
guys
Calendly.
use?
That's
Oh
if you don't
man.
have that, you got to get that. That's saves so much
Yeah.
time. That the back and forth trying to set up appointments is such a
Yeah.
hassle.
I mean, you sent me that link. I'm like, okay. And it's free, right? Is it free, Calendarly?
I
Well,
think there's a free version, but I think it's $25 a year or something like that for the full version. It's really
and it's
cheap.
worth it
So
then.
yeah, it's
Okay.
definitely worth it. Yeah,
Yeah, I when I saw it was so easy to set that up, to set this interview up, I'm like, okay, I got to figure this out because this is the way to do it. So
definitely.
I've already learned something, Joe. Thank you for helping me over in West Virginia. See how the our brothers on the east do it. So you do that. Then how often are you meeting with and who's the lead pastor on the campus you're on?
Well, we're a multi-site church.
Okay.
Our lead pastors are David Platt and
Mhm.
Mike Kelsey, and my location pastor is Eric Saunders here in Arlington campus. We
Okay.
have five spread out across Virginia and Maryland, so we're kind of all spread out all over this
Okay.
area, TMB area.
And you say so Eric's who you are there with?
Yeah, Eric's the
So how often do you and Eric get together? Is it like do you see each other daily? Do you just once a week? How does that work?
Yeah, we have office. I mean, he's one wall away from me.
Okay.
We meet several times, and oftentimes we
Yeah.
just kind of pop into each other's office and just
Yeah.
talk about what's going on, talk
Yeah.
about the different people in our church, and
That's
so
cool.
it's we have a very close relationship.
Yeah, that's really, really good. I love that. Well, Joe, some of the things that I get back, feedback, and haters are going to hate, and there's always going to be critics out there on what we do. But guys will come on and say, "Well, there's no biblical evidence for an assistant pastor," and
Mhm.
we could say that about a lot of things that we do or we have in the church. But just because, the Bible doesn't specifically say assistant pastor, one of the things that you were in your writing, you gave some biblical evidences of a need. And I
Mhm.
think you started with like Moses and Aaron. And so when you look at this role that you're fulfilling and this role you're fulfilling as an assistant, what are some illustrations that we see in the Bible that shows, and then we already talked kind of about the elder and the plurality thing, but even in a role of an assistant working with your senior pastor, what are some things you see there in the Bible that just kind of confirm that?
Yeah, and it's definitely true that the Bible doesn't mention assistant pastors, associate pastors. It also doesn't mention lead pastors.
It's
What
true. Yeah,
what it
you're
mentions is
absolutely right.
it
That's
just
true.
mentions pastors. And
Yeah.
so what we
Yeah.
look at is like, what is the relationship between pastors? How do they
Mm,
help each other? How do they serve each other? And I think when we look at it from that angle, we see that all over the Bible. We
yeah.
see it in the very beginning with Moses and Aaron. We see it with Elijah and Elisha. We see it with Peter and Mark. We see it with Paul and all kinds of people,
Yeah.
Timothy and Luke. And just so um, sometimes I think from that we kind of developed the idea. Well, obviously there's a head guy in charge, and he's the lead pastor, and that's what the Bible's talking about as a pastor. And I think that's not the case. All these other guys are also pastors, but they're helping someone who's kind of taking the lead in certain areas. So I think
Yeah.
that's the model we should be looking at. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. So I love that. So when you and that was a great statement and you went through it, but I want to back up. You said all these guys are pastors.
Right.
Okay. So even though they might be the in second place,
Hmm.
you would say biblically these guys are still pastors.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of the problems is too often we try to make distinction between pastors. Like we
Yeah.
want to have a pecking order. And one of the things I really appreciate about my church plan is like we had two full-time paid pastors, and the rest of us, we had three or four of us were lay pastors, but we were all pastors equally.
Mm,
The only distinction was that the paid pastors, they had more able to focus on their because it was a full-time job, and we was able to support them do that. But when it came to doing the work of the ministry, we were all pastors and we were all treated as such. And I think when you have that kind of model, that mentality, it really changes the dynamic. And you see that it's much easier to serve each other well, rather than just thinking like a business where there's a hierarchy
yeah.
and the org charts matters more than what the biblical relationships are.
Man, that's so good. That's really, really good. And I do. I think that, and when you look at it that way, I think some guys they're more of an assistant to the pastor than an assistant pastor. You know what I mean? And it's go do this, go run there, go,
Right.
go to Sam's Club, go and you're more of a gopher than you even are a pastor.
Right. And that's why I appreciate the title of your podcast, but I think the assistant pastor is probably a term that we should kind of fade away because I think too often we get the idea like in the office, assistant to the regional manager kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
It's like assistant pastor makes it sound like he's not really a pastor. He's like an executive assistant, like a secretary.
Yeah.
And that's why I prefer like terms like associate, where it makes it more like you're also a pastor. You're just in a different relationship to
Mm,
the lead, because it's we're all equal in pastoral authority, but we have lead among leads, or for example,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
there's different distinction there.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we do, because the title becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where you're assistant, therefore you're expected just to do the lead pastor's bidding and
Yeah.
assistant. And that's not really the biblical model.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to cut that part out. I don't want to hear that. No, but I believe that. And I think that there is a role, and I think biblically we could go, was it Acts 15 or 14, where they're talking about the Gentiles being saved, and then you see James standing up, saying, Men and brethren,
Right.
here's I've heard all of this, here's the direction we're going to go. And so it seems as though even in that section among the elders, James kind of had that authority to stand up. He was, very possibly a lead
Right.
in the church there in Antioch. So I think there's a place for that, but I also think that if we understand what you are saying, when we step into an elders meeting, or we step into whatever we want to call it, a pastoral meeting,
Mhm.
we've got to check that ego at the door.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Obviously, the model for Jesus was we're to serve others. He came to serve us, not to be
Yeah,
served. And so I think that
yeah,
when you take on the lead pastor, you're taking on the role of lead servant.
yeah.
And so you
Amen.
had to find a way to put yourself, again, we got to make the distinction between American culture of leadership and the biblical culture of leadership.
Hmm.
And how do those interact in a way? So obviously, yes, when we do go into elder meeting, somebody needs to be in charge. Somebody needs to run
Yeah,
the meeting.
yeah.
Um, and somebody needs to do the day-to-day church. That's why I think lead pastor is a, but again, it's a relational role. It's
It is.
how you have a relation between the elder board and the congregation, things
Mhm.
like that. So,
Yeah,
um, but
that's
it's should
fantastic.
be the lead servant of all the people.
That's really good. Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, you've been in meetings and I've been in meetings in other organizations or different things. When the chair or the executive is not a leader,
Right.
and those are horrible.
They are. Yeah. That's
Somebody make a motion, somebody do something, this is wasting my
yeah.
time. And so you have to have that. And I've heard people say, I don't believe in that because, you can't have a two-headed dragon. But it's not that, because again, it's what you said. That's an American, corporate mindset.
Mhm. Right. And when I was coming up to the Marines, we oftentimes we were the two people with the same rank, the same dignity and worth and pay. They're all the same on that level. But because of the certain functions, they had to make decisions for the other person that
Hmm.
was the same rank. And so there is kind of like a hierarchy of because of roles and
Hmm.
functions that we had to take on. And
Yeah.
so obviously we do those kind of structures in place.
Yeah. No, that's really, really good. That's really good. So in your roles then, and how you're serving there at
Mhm.
the church, in the realm of counseling.
Mhm.
So you got people coming in for counseling, and I'm sure it's very busy. So in that, after you do some counseling, are you going to Eric and saying, "Hey, look, I just had so and so here. Here's what's going on in their lives." Do you kind of do you feel like only if you need to with him? I don't want to bug him with everything. How does that work and what you're sharing with him?
Yeah, we have a pretty large congregation. We have about 700 people come on a
Yeah.
Sunday. So, but oftentimes me and Eric know the people really well. We try to know our members
Yeah.
exceptionally well. So, especially if it's a member, I will go talk to him about it. We'll
Okay.
discuss it. He does the same with me. It's not
Yeah.
just always take things up the chain. He also wants to make sure I'm informed about what's going on with our people and how, um, because we want to be kind of a team counseling approach where the whole church should be counseling everyone. And
Hmm.
so, again, we don't want to make a distinction that just because I'm a pastoral counselor that I'm doing something different than the rest of the church. We're all called to counsel one another, and so he keeps me informed. I keep him informed, um, and sometimes it's uh, Eric's 15 years younger than I am,
Okay.
and so it's it's a strange dynamic sometimes when you're having to
Yeah.
answer to somebody younger than you who's a
Yeah.
lead. So it's very humbling, but it's very
That
fruitful.
says, to me, that says a lot for you and him.
Oh, definitely, and for me, I was like, I, I've been around enough to know, like when I came through the Marines, like age doesn't matter. It's experience, and so
Hmm.
Eric definitely has much more experience in pastoral ministry than I do. He's
Hmm.
really good at it. I've learned so much from him. And
Yeah.
honestly, if I stay his associate pastor for the rest of my life, I'll be fine with that.
Wow.
Right? Because I'm honored to serve with him, honored to serve with, for him
Yeah.
in the church.
Praise the Lord. That's really good. What are And this just from you stirring that's made my mind think, what are some things as you've seen ministry, obviously with your writing, and you've had connections with a lot of pastors, and you've
Hmm.
seen a lot of these guys in action and what they do. What are some things that you see that stand out? How old is Eric?
He's almost turned 40. He's almost
Okay.
40.
All right, man. He is young.
Yeah, he's
Good for
pretty young.
him.
Yeah.
Good for him. So I'm 47. Um, and so when you have Eric there, what are some things that he's done that you would say, and I know I'm putting you on the spot with this
Mhm.
one, that would make you say such a statement? Because a lot of guys are like, yeah, I'm here. God's called me here, but they're not going to say, I enjoy working with this guy. and,
Yeah.
and I'm here because this is what God wants. But, obviously you guys have a good relationship
Hmm.
and you're working well together. I just think that's awesome, and I love that. What are some things that stand out to you that as guys are listening, and I know senior pastors listen to this podcast, and even with my book, as I wrote it for assistant pastors, I've had more senior pastors say, "Look, I've learned so much from this just on how to treat an assistant
Yeah.
or associate or whatever we want to say with that." What are some things that you would say that Eric does that really makes a difference for you and allows you to serve at the capacity you're serving?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the key things is he honestly truly cares about me.
Hmm.
And I think it's not just that he cares about the role I'm filling.
Yeah.
He cares about me as a person. He cares about my development and my spiritual growth. And so he that changes the dynamic in a way I think is very positive. Also, um, he's very humble about the fact. I mean, we joked that I was a affirmative action hire because I was an old guy that get the senior citizen got hired on. Because at the time I was literally the oldest guy in our church when I first our campus when I first got here.
Wow.
And so but he's being able to show that he doesn't let that intimidate him. He knows that
Mm,
God, his experience is different than mine, and
mm,
he
mm.
trusts me to use my life experience to bring into the ministry. But he knows he has more pastoral experience, so he's able to kind of use that and show like, here's where I need to grow. Here's how he can help me grow. But he also knows here's where he can learn from me. Um, so it's very again, it's not looking at a hierarchy, looking at the org chart, saying here's how we're going to run things. It's more like we're pastors together. What can we do to help each other?
Yeah, it's really good. Really good. And then do you guys like outside of, I mean, do you do lunch together or coffee together or golf together? Is there anything that you do outside of offices too to help that relationship?
Yeah, not at this stage because we're different life stages. He's got three young kids at home. I
That's
don't.
yeah,
So
that's
I,
different. That's
I got a
totally
lot more
different. Yeah.
time. But yeah, but we interact so much during the day that
Yeah.
it's we don't. I think sometimes that can be helpful to kind of, especially for senior pastors and younger pastors, because
Mm,
younger pastors really need to kind of like to know they're appreciated in that more mentoring
yeah.
role. And I'm an old guy, so I don't have that
Yeah.
same need, but I would say that's definitely a need for the younger guys.
That's really good. And then, so with him having young kids and you're in your stage of life too, I know that has to be a help to him. And where, you've been there, done that. And actually, you've
Mhm.
got a book on parenting. Is that right?
Yeah, I got a book, The Faith and Field Guide for Parents.
Okay. Field Guide for Parents.
Um, and one of the ways that I've tried to help with Eric, because I know because he's a different stage of life. I get my kids out of the house.
Yeah.
I got a little more time at night. I can take appointments at night where he can't.
That's
He needs
good.
to be home with
Yeah.
his kids. So it's
Man.
having that
Good
kind
for
of
you.
different life stages
Yeah.
really kind of helps us to balance
Yeah.
things out.
Yeah. That's really good because, where I'm at, I've got one that's 20, and then I've got three teenagers at home.
Hmm.
They're all athletes. We're running all the time, and it's a crazy stage of life,
It definitely is. Yeah.
right now. And even like you said, so now they're older though. I do have more evening time once we get back
Hmm.
from practices. When they were little, it was, it's a 2 hour process to get them ready for bed and brush teeth and
Yeah.
and so that's really good that you're doing that. And I think that's huge. And it's huge you understand that,
Hmm.
you
Well,
know.
let me say something. Probably the most controversial thing I'll say is that I think a lot of senior pastors, when they get ready to retire, should go back to being an associate pastor, assistant pastor.
Really?
Go back and help a younger guy out
Yeah.
because you are in a different life stage. Because too often the pastors and the lead pastors, they're almost pretty close in the same life stage. They got young
Hmm.
kids at home. They don't have the same
Hmm.
older, and also older pastors have a lot of knowledge they could pass on to the assistants
Yeah.
in ways, and also just being able to show like, hey, I don't have to have the limelight. I can go back and step back into a number two role. That shows you truly are humble.
Yeah.
And I think that more pastors did that, the dynamic in the church would be really blessed. I think it'd
Yeah.
be awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. Is that you need to write that article. I'd
Yeah.
love to see the comments that come in after that. But seriously, I think you're right. Because even when you were saying that, I'm like, it's so good because, even with, the younger guys that we would have on staff or whatever, it's like, you need to go home.
Yeah.
You need to be home. And I've been there, I've done that. I know what that is. And
Yeah.
just to be able to help them in those stages of life. And I think too, in that role, you're able even to talk to other members where they're like, "Hey, where's Eric?" It's like, well, Eric's where he needs to be.
Yeah.
He's got a kid. He's got two kids with the flu and one that's starting to cough, and he needs to be home helping mama today, and he's
Yeah.
not going to be able to be in. And just by you saying it, oh yeah, that's probably where he does need to be
Yeah.
instead of well, he should be here or whatever. And I could, when you were talking about that, I was thinking you're absolutely right,
Hmm.
and that would be a very interesting dynamic. And I mean, yeah, it's just, and it's biblical. Again, it's like what you're saying. That's the mentorship. That's discipleship. Hey, I'll
Right.
come alongside. I'll make visits. I'll stay out of the way. I'm going to let you lead, and I'm just here to support you and help you through this.
Yeah. And too often the senior pastor is the oldest man on the staff. And
Hmm.
so if he's 30 years old, what happens when a 70-year-old wants to come in to talk to somebody?
Yeah,
It can be helpful to have somebody a little older on that can
absolutely.
kind of relate to that kind of those older age groups.
Absolutely. That's really good. So then that's going to springboard into the next thing I would like to talk about. And that was some of the scripture that you pulled in, and then your final points, which I loved. But you were talking about even from Philippians 2.
Hmm.
And so what is a mindset? Joe, when you're coming in, so these guys are listening, and okay, day by day biblically, what should be my theme verses here? We know if we truly believe what you said, we are overseers, we are shepherds, we are um to minister to the flock and to shepherd the flock, all of us as a group. But then you were talking about how it's so important to put others ahead of you.
Right.
So what's some biblical mindset in order to be successful as an associate, as an assistant that you've got to have coming into this?
Yeah. I think the again, our primary focus should be, as what Jesus said, we're called to serve,
Hmm.
and everything else is kind of secondary to that. The structure, how we do that, is all secondary. So our heart should be in the right place about we're called to serve, and sometimes that'll be serving in ways that are high profile. Sometimes it'll be low profile. Uh, Trust that God's got us there for a reason, and that's
Hmm.
maybe it's because our hearts, or I think a lot of reasons why people fail in ministry is because they try to take a position that's not really what God's called them to do.
That's really
It,
good. Say that again. The reason people aren't successful in ministry is why?
they're taking on a role that God has not called them to do.
So good.
In business, it's called the Peter principle, where
Hmm.
you get promoted to the past your point of competency.
Hmm.
And sometimes we want to rush our competency or rush our.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're highly competent in our job, but our
Right.
hearts we're not. And I
Yeah.
think the humility and servitude should be our baseline. Like, how willing am I willing to serve? I mean, I've had elders that I like. I don't want to serve in the nursery. I'm like, well, then you're not called to pastoral ministry.
Mm.
If you don't want to serve our kids, what they want to do is they want to teach theology. They want to do the high profile, the
They want the
intellectual stuff.
platform. They want the
Exactly.
platform.
And so I think that should be our basic mindset: is how much do we want to serve? And it's almost kind of like wait for God to kind of drag you into a higher role or
Hmm.
different area. Use your giftings, of course, where you're good at. Like I think I'm better at teaching than I am at preaching, and
Hmm.
so that's why I feel comfortable being in a place where I don't have to
Hmm.
preach more
Yeah.
than a dozen times, half a dozen times a year. So
Yeah. No, that's really good. I think, the Peter principle, I think that maybe it was Peter Drucker that came up with that idea that we call it
yeah,
that. Then Jim Collins, the right seat of the bus.
yeah,
And so it is a biblical concept, and it's our gifting, but it's also the right seat where we're supposed to be. So I'm
right,
really big on my guys doing, like working genius tests and personality tests, but it helps
hmm,
me as I see them, making sure because if not only what you're saying is you don't succeed, but you don't enjoy what you're doing,
right,
because,
yeah,
I'm preaching all the time, but man, I just want to teach.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it can be frustrating. So I think that's really important. And you're absolutely right. We have a Christian school with our ministry, and one of the things I'll do is I bring my intern slash residents in as I get them plugged into the school.
Hmm.
And they go, I don't want to teach. I don't want to do that. But the one of the things I want to do though is for them to get one, all aspects of ministry, but it's two is to see that heart. Am I willing to teach seventh graders Bible?
Right.
And to deal with that and to grade papers and to grade verses. Am I willing to do what's needed in ministry?
Absolutely. And from that, you can kind of determine like, I'm just not good with kids. And there can
Yeah.
be reasons why, but it shouldn't be because you think you're above that or you're too good for that. You should try it first and definitely until somebody's like, hey, we need you some over here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I love that. That is really, really good. So one of the things that stood out to me in your article too, Joe, it's kind of when you scan through, the main points that you made. Oh yeah, we need to pray. I need to have my personal life. But I love what you said about prayer.
mhm,
And now what you said about prayer changes everything in my mind that I know more about you because you're not, at mid 50s praying for your senior pastor who's 70.
mhm.
You're praying for your senior pastor who's 40.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about that and the importance of praying for your fellow pastors and especially your lead pastor?
Yeah. It's hard to have animosity and a hard heart towards somebody you're praying for regularly.
Mm.
So the more you're actually praying
Man,
for
that's
these
so good.
men,
Okay.
the
This
more
all
you're,
needs to be written down. Right. So it's hard to have animosity and a hard heart towards someone that you're praying for regularly.
mhm. Yeah.
That's so
Yeah.
good.
And if I'm talking really truly praying for them, not just kind of like have them on a checklist where you're saying
Mhm.
their name as you're
I
passing
pray
through
for
a list of
pastor
things.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're thinking about what they're going through, praying for their situation. And the more you pray about the situation, the more empathy you develop for them.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes it's really hard to see. You see the power and the prestige that the senior pastor or lead pastor has. You don't see all the pressure he's under, all
Yeah.
the decisions he's got to make that you should be glad you're not having to make that yet because it's really tough. So the more we can be praying for them about that, the more we have understanding of what their role is.
Mhm.
And if you don't know what their role is, ask them and ask why how you can pray for them
Yeah.
and pray specifically for certain things because that really softens your heart toward them and in their work and just gives you a
Yeah.
better appreciation.
Yep. Man, that's really good. Yeah. I try to when I can. As I'll sit down with my guys in an elders meeting and say, look, I'm struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And, I set them all down, as my oldest, my daughter, and she's getting ready to go off to college. And I'm like, look, I have no idea how I'm going to be. This is a whole new thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally, I'm not dealing well with this internally. So I have no idea what's going to come out externally. So just be patient with me and pray with me through this because I
Yeah.
grumpy and ugly. I don't know what's coming, weepy one day and mad the next. I don't know. And then not just to inform them, but to know, okay, these guys are praying for me as we go through this. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, too often, a lot of the problems we have in America is because people don't feel known. They don't feel like they can be open and honest with each other.
Mhm.
Pastors should be able to be honest with other pastors and elders. It's just, I
Yeah.
mean, because we don't really have anybody else. It's really hard to kind of open up the congregation because
Yeah.
they expect you to be above all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. And if you can't be like open with your other ministers,
Yeah.
you're going to be a lonely life.
Yeah. No, it's true. I was on the phone with one of our elders yesterday and I'm like, man, I'm out on the trail because I can't take any more right now.
Yeah.
I just had to go and get some sunshine and get out on the trail for a little bit and just kind of share my heart and we should be like with each other, we should be able to have
Mhm.
a relationship.
And that's where the role of assistant really is helpful. Is like that's what they're there for to kind of help carry that load. And
Mhm.
I think more lead pastors need to give that and just say like I'm struggling right now with this area of my life. Can you help me with this?
Yeah.
And give them more. It shouldn't be just like always for their growth. Like
Yeah.
we want to give you more time in the pulpit so you can get your skills. Like sometimes it's like I need you to be in the pulpit this week because I'm just exhausted.
Yeah. Man. I don't know if anybody says that, Joe. I mean, now that you know when you say it, because
Yeah.
I mean, I'm proud. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Oh
And,
yeah. Yeah.
no, I've got to be the one teaching. No,
Yeah.
I don't care how bad it's been. I'm doing Sunday. When really we'd be better off not.
Yeah.
and just being honest and saying, look, it's been a horrible week. I've had so much on me mentally. I'm not in the place I need to be, you know. And I've had the guys come to me and say, hey, look, we're gonna let us preach Sunday. And I'm like, no, I got it. No, you don't got it. And they're like, you're right, I don't. Go ahead. And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But that's where elders come in too, where they see where you are and what's going on, and they feel if you're doing it right, they feel they can make that statement.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where being known is really,
Yeah.
really essential because
Yeah.
you're right. Too often we're so proud we don't want to say we're weak or we can't do it, especially if you're the senior because you're like, what if they like him better?
Yeah.
What if
Right. Right.
they could come
Yeah.
replace me? It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
but we
I
should.
struggled with that. I was 10 days out from the Morgantown Marathon. I was going to be top 10, and I was training. Yeah, I was in shape. I was 39, doing about 7:20, 7:15s a mile. And 10 days before it, I had a massive heart attack.
Oh no,
And it was just, the doc said a fluke, but 100% blockage in the Widowmaker.
goodness.
And, you go through those thoughts that you just said. Man, the church hasn't skipped a beat since I've been going. Nobody's leaving. Everybody's still coming. Why do they even need me? And that's again, that sounds humble, but that's pride.
Yeah.
That's pride. And some of it too from the heart is just mental because you're sick and it's a
Oh
game.
yeah.
But look, it's not, I guess the way I look at it too, and then this is more about senior pastor than assistant, is maybe he is next. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it is time for me to be an assistant, but it's just, I don't know, it's that team working together. And like you said, and I think the key word is to be known.
Hmm.
And so maybe some of our associates or assistants are listening going, yes, 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 I wish my pastor would do this. There's a couple things I think in that role you can do. One, you can lead by example.
Right.
And when you as an assistant are struggling, just knock on the lead pastor's door and say, hey, pastor, I'm really struggling in this. And, hey, my wife and I are really just going through a hard time, or the
Hmm.
kids, I'm at wit's end. Would you just really pray for me right now? Lead in that way,
Definitely.
and hey, I just need some counsel in this area. And you can lead in that way. And two, I think, pastor, how can I pray for you?
Hmm.
Hey, look, I know, your dad is, really sick right now, or your mom's sick right now, or you're going this. How can we help you, and how can I pray for you in this situation? Because again, I think we just go through life like everything's good, and we
Yeah.
don't talk about these things. But that's
Yeah.
that's just not life.
No, absolutely. And we should be confessing our sin to each other. I mean, I know it's hard sometimes when you think, I don't want to confess my sin to the guy who's out to write
Yeah.
my performance reviews.
Yeah.
But
Right, right.
but that's what we're called to do.
Yeah, amen. That is it. All right, so another question, and we'll get things summed up here. How, as a writer, and I enjoy it, writing as well, how important is it for these young guys that are listening to start developing a habit of writing?
I would say it depends. I think writing definitely can help you with the sermon preparation and some of your teaching. I think too often, though, one of the problems with a lot of ministry nowadays is guys don't want to be pastors. They want to be political pundits. They want to be writers. They want to be something other than pastor.
Mm,
And so you got to look at what your temptation is. Like
mm.
because I think if I was a pastor when I was 20 and I got in writing, I would have been like, that's what I really want to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I've heard, I think it's Mark Batterson, it's
Yeah.
up your way, say there's pastor writers and then there's writers who are pastors.
That's
And
exactly
he'll
right.
say, I'm a writer who's a pastor.
Right.
you know, Either way, but I think what you just said is very important. If our calling is there, we are called to
Hmm.
pastor.
Yeah. And if you recognize your writing to become improve as a pastor, it can be really helpful because it helps you clarify your thinking, help you clarify your communication, helps you communicate in a way that's better. So it can be really helpful. But I would say the problem is I think some people think writing means getting published.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to write a blog and two people read it.
Yeah,
but
you're right.
I mean, Jesus had 12 people and changed the world from that. So
That's
just
absolutely.
if you're just writing for a couple of people, you can have a huge impact on people.
Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, and it was something, and again, but like something like that though, you don't even know,
Hmm.
who's reading it or where it'll end up. Monday, I got a letter, an envelope in the mail, no return address. I'm like, all right, here we go again. Somebody, and it's like, and it's a little newsletter, and it says read page 8, and I'm like, oh, here we go. Somebody straightening me out again. And this guy writes his 8 page. I didn't confess, I didn't necessarily read it all. I just went to page 8, and in their closing remarks, they quoted me from one of my blogs.
Oh,
I don't know this publication. I don't know this newsletter. I don't know these people. But it's like, hey, finally, it's a positive way instead of a negative. But you put it out there and you just don't know
right. I mean,
who can glean from it, who's read it, and how God can use that. So that's what I enjoy about it.
yeah. And I could say going from being a writer, and some of my top articles had hundreds of thousands of page views, going to personal counseling where you're one-on-one, that is definitely more rewarding and important because you can see the actual change. I mean, there's plenty of stuff there's plenty of stuff I write. I can't remember what I wrote last week.
I know.
So it's just, you just thrown into the ether and nobody's catching it. But when you're
I
actually
love
with
that because again, this what you were saying is it goes back to even your attitude and your heart, Joe. And I love this. It's about the person, not the platform.
Right. Exactly.
I can't counsel you because I'm going to have 100,000 people read this article I'm getting ready, right? Because it's really good. But
Yeah.
and it is good, but our calling is to that person.
Exactly. Yeah. As pastors, we should be focused on our local church first. That's who we're responsible for. When we are standing for Jesus, he's going to look at our church membership roll and say, tell me about these people. He's not going to ask you how many page views you got on some article you wrote. That's not really going to matter.
Yeah. That brings tears to my eyes thinking about it because we answer for their souls.
Definitely.
Not the souls of our non-members, not the souls of our readers, not the souls of our subscribers, the souls of the ones that God has given to us.
Right. And if you don't care about those people, then you shouldn't be in pastoral ministry.
Amen.
If you're like these people you're a young pastor and everybody's in their 60s, like these people are too old. I want a mega church kind of congregation. I want some. You should be a pastor. Whoever God sends your way, that is who you're supposed to love, and that's who you're going to be held accountable for. So
that's so good, man. Thank you so much. That's good. That's encouraging to me, and I know everybody's listening. If they're not encouraged or challenged or convicted by that, get out.
Definitely.
And I keep dragging this on, and I'm sorry, but you just keep making my mind work. Okay, so you're in an area where there's a lot of politics.
Yes, definitely.
You guys, and you try to be careful with that. But you made the statement, the first statement, a lot of guys want to be, in the realms of politics.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're there, you're in the heart of it. And we all know the flack that your church took.
Yeah.
Because of a president coming by.
Right.
And David praying for him. With that, as you men, and I think, I don't know, David's always been a hero of mine, so I'm going to support him in that. Mm-hmm. But how are you careful with that? How are you careful not to, because you've got a huge, if it's a president, we know where we stand with that.
Right.
He is the ruler over us, and we should be praying for them.
Definitely, yes.
That's just biblical.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure you have both sides of the political party sit in your congregation every Sunday.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
You just leave it out completely?
No, we talk about
how do you handle?
Yeah, our position is where the Bible speaks clearly, we're going to speak clearly.
Okay.
The Bible speaks clearly about issues like abortion and sexuality and transgenderism, things like that. We're going to speak clearly and emphatically on that.
I love it.
God doesn't say a lot about the fiscal policy or the gold standard or Bitcoin. Yeah. It's like we're not going to talk about that kind of stuff. We're going to focus on this, and we want to try to change people's heart to be more biblical first, because too often, I came up through politics. I used to work for a couple of political campaigns. I was in, and I realized that you're not really going to change hearts and minds in politics. The best you can do is try to work to get a policy approved, something like that. And a lot of people don't really care about politics as politics. They care about it as a fight, and they want to fight. And that's why when you have two people of different political persuasions in the church, what they want to do is fight. They don't want to be united. The main thing we have in common is Jesus Christ, not political parties, not anything like that. So we should be able to say, I disagree with your politics completely, but you're a brother in Christ or your sister in Christ. I'm going to be with you for all eternity. We should be able to set some of these things aside.
Hmm.
Not that we can't talk about them, not we have discussions, but that shouldn't be the thing that divides us in the church.
Yeah.
We're really trying to work hard to that. It's not easy, people,
Yeah.
especially in a city. Of course, we're DC,
Yeah.
where people
Oh yeah.
work and their livings here. We've had so many people that are affected by the layoffs,
Oh
and
my,
just
it's
it's
hard.
unreal. So it's
Even for me in West Virginia, we've got so many that are, the government and government financial programs. We have West Virginia University here, so we've got a lot of
yeah,
people, these grants and working on these different things that it's been very rough. And I said,
it is.
I've been in ministry 25 years. I don't know if I've ever seen such a division
No,
in those 25 years because it used to be a division of Republican, Democrat.
yeah,
It's Republican, Republican. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Now it's
yeah,
those guys, yes, those government workers need to go. And then there's my governor. I mean, last Sunday, a guy shaking my hand crying,
yeah.
saying, Pastor, I'm gonna have to sell my house and leave. Friday when I clocked out, I got an email right after I clocked out saying you will not clock back in. And then those are hard as a pastor, those are hard times.
It is, and it's that's where whether you agree with policies or not, you have to help the people that's in front of
Mhm.
you that's dealing with it,
Yeah.
and that's where it makes it really harder if they think you're a political pundit and you're on Twitter talking about these issues. Like
Yeah.
I can't go to him with this because I know where he stands. He's
Mm.
gonna he's gonna be glad I lost my job or
Yeah. Yeah.
so we have to be careful about how not to put partisan stuff in a church that don't belong there.
Amen. Amen. And I think as pastors, regardless of where we stand in the ranking, we need to keep the politics off our social media.
Oh, definitely. I think more often than not, pastors should not be on social media at all.
Hmm.
Unless you're promoting some of your stuff or just that, being you you should not be talking about politics on social media. You should not do anything that's
Yeah.
because people are getting an impression of you that's not based on your sermons
Yeah.
or how you're counseling people, how you're dealing with your congregation. They're getting it based on what tribe do you belong to, which how can I peg you as this or that, and
Mm.
that's not what you want because it doesn't matter really what they think, but that's going to trickle down to what your people think about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Man, that's so good, Joe. Bro, thank you so much.
yeah,
This
thanks so
was
much for having me on. Really
fantastic, man.
appreciate it.
This was fantastic. This was a great kickoff to whatever season we're on. This should have been the finale of one of the seasons. But no, that just was very helpful, very encouraging to me and a lot to think about there. And obviously your writings are out there. Guys can look you up and see what you've put into print. And hey, I think you would be open to this. And if not, I'll edit it off of this. But if these guys are struggling or they need some help, email you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm an assistant. I'm in this position. I just need some counsel.
Yeah.
So,
Send me an email at joe.carter at thegospelcoalition.org. And
okay.
I'd be glad to.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome, Joe. And then again, just your books out there on parenting. And so if you want to know how to raise, what are those guys that Eric, what's his name? That's the seal that's like raise your kids according to put them on the front lines and, tie their hands behind their back and throw them in the swimming pool. I don't think his book's going to talk about stuff like that.
No, definitely not.
So even though those are fun reads, it's I'm sure encourage your book, Field Guide to Parenting. Is that the
Faith and Field Guide for Parents?
The Faith and Field Guide to Parenting. So make sure, guys, if you got young families, you check it out as well and snag that. I looked it up on Amazon, and I think it's right now less than $5. So grab that book, read it, and use that in your lives. So Joe, thank you very much, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Art of the Assistant. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, we'd love to recommend Pastor Trigg's book, Ministering from the Middle, Becoming an Effective Assistant Pastor. Whether you're currently serving in ministry or preparing for leadership, this book will equip you with practical wisdom and biblical insight to navigating the unique challenges of supporting your church. You can grab your copy on Amazon just by searching Ministering from the Middle, or check the link in the description. If you found this episode helpful, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us get the word out there. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, keep serving faithfully.